Welcome to Mind Your Mental Health channel. This is our 13th episode. In this episode, we are going to talk about brain, mind and brain interface. So in the last 12 episodes, we were discussing about different aspects of the mind. We were talking about perception, thinking, emotions, behavior, primary mental functions like memory, concentration, attention. We were talking about different aspects of the mind. When we explained about mind, we observed that mind is in the brain. In other words, certain functions of the brain is collectively called as mind. So, if you understand mind more, we also need to understand a little bit more about the brain and what is brain and what are the parts and how does it work, so that our understanding of mind is complete. So let's talk about the brain. All of us know the brain. We would have seen the photograph. Some of you might even seen the specimen if you have done the science course. So brain is one of the important organ in the human body or any living being. Brain is essential for all other functions of the body. Any other organ in the body, your heart, stomach, liver, lungs, need the brain and commands from the brain to work properly. So that way, brain becomes the most important organ in the human body. And it is a power center, it is a command center. And it's so important. That's why the nature has placed the brain in a vault-like structure, the skull, very strong bone, and brain is kept safely in that vault because brain is very important organ in the body. Brain alone doesn't constitute the nervous system. Nervous system is divided into two broad subcategories. One is called central nervous system. Now, other one is called peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system, as the name says, it is a centralized part of the whole nervous system. Important aspect of the whole nervous system. So, central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord. And peripheral nervous system consists of peripheral nerves. So, broadly, we have three kind of substructures in the nervous system. One is brain within our skull, and there is a spinal cord which runs down through the neck, through the back, through our backbone, and ends in the end of the backbone. So that is the spinal cord. Brain and spinal cord together is called central nervous system. Then we have number of thousands and thousands of nerves branching out from spinal cord, which is inside the vertebral column or backbone, into different parts of the body. Some of it will go to the muscles here, some of it will go to the heart, some of it will go to the lung, liver and spleen. All the parts of the body is connected to the nervous system. Brain is a very soft organ. Now, it weighs about 3 pounds in adult human being, about 3 pounds. And the researchers say that 60% of the brain is made of fat. Then another 40% is made of water, carbohydrates, proteins, and many other components or constituents. And some researchers would even say about 60% of the brain consists of water. That's why brain is so soft, almost semi-solid. And brain has gray matter and white matter. The outermost parts of the brain, this what we call as cerebrum and cerebellum, are gray matters. And the connections coming from that cerebrum and cerebellum and other parts of the brain, that branching out, that is called as a white matter. They are bundles of kind of nerve-like structures, axon. We'll come to that a little later. So, brain is a very soft organ. It weighs about 3 pounds and it's kind of a very soft, and it consists of a lot of water and a lot of fat. And let's go into the structure of the gray matters. Brain is kind of consists of layers and layers. Outermost layers consists of two hemispheres, two halves of the brain, almost a replication. Two halves of the brain, and whole thing is called cerebrum, the outermost part of the brain. Cerebrum, and behind the brain, and this part, we have cerebellum. That is another lobe or another part of the brain. So the outer part, about 2/3 of the brain, consists of this outer part, which is called cerebrum, cerebellum. Then we have inner part, that is called limbic system. Then we have a brain stem, then which continues as spinal cord. So cerebrum constitutes majority portion or major portion of the brain. So cerebrum has 4 lobes. We also call it a cerebral cortex. So 4 lobes: frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital lobe. Frontal lobe is in the front, parietal lobe in the sides, and temporal lobe also in the sides, extending little back, rare. And then we have an occipital lobe at the back. This is the cerebrum. And then also we have cerebellum. Each lobe has its own function. Functions also overlap between the lobes. For example, frontal lobe, some of the functions of the frontal lobe is thinking, and our personality and emotions also kind of frontal lobe mediates some of these personality and the emotions. And another major function of the frontal lobe is motor function. When I say motor function, what I am talking about is movements of the body. If I am walking, that is a motor function. If I am lifting my hand like this, that is a motor function. So that function is also managed by frontal lobe. And there is something called executive function. Now, planning and executing things. Suppose I'm going out for some appointments. I'm going out. Suddenly I receive a call from my wife asking me to pick up something from the nearby store. So I have a appointment to attend, and there is something I need to pick up from a store, and I also meet a friend on the way. There are 3 things coming in. And planning this, first talk to the friend and quickly finish the appointment. On the way back, let me go pick up something from the shop and go home. So that is the executive function. That is what the frontal lobe is doing to human beings. So executive function is one of the frontal lobe functions. Then reasoning power and social understanding. All these things are frontal lobe functions. And we have parietal lobe on the sides. Mainly parietal lobe is a function of the parietal lobe is sensory function. The sensory perception. What we perceive through the skin, the nerves conduct the information back to the brain. So this information is processed in the parietal lobe. And spatial awareness. Now there is a camera in front of me. I am here on the sofa set, and there is somebody here, there is somebody there. The spatial, the distance, the gestalt function, all those things are parietal lobe function. And parietal lobe also has speech function, language function. So language function is kind of a shared between different lobes. Parietal lobe also contributes to the speech and language. Then we have a temporal lobe. Temporal lobe is very important for memory and hearing. The sensation what we hear through hearing. Now the audible information, audible impulses what we get, that is decoded in the temporal lobe. And temporal lobe also contribute to the language. And naturally when you hear, you process that forms the part of the language also. And temporal lobe is also kind of has a role in smell and taste. So that is temporal lobe. Then we have occipital lobe, which is in the rear of the brain. And it's comparatively smaller lobe compared to parietal and frontal. And the main function of the occipital lobe is visual perception. When I see something, when I see a picture there, I perceive that, but that perception need to be processed. Then I need to understand that's a framed picture which is there, and that is what is there in the frame. This is drawn by somebody. Oh, this is the person who's drawn that. So that processing is done in the occipital lobe. Of course, the other lobes also contribute to that. And memory is another important function in the occipital lobe. They also contribute to the visual memory. So if I see something, I need to remember that. That memory is kind of managed by occipital lobe. So we have seen frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, occipital lobe, and there is another lobe called cerebellum. That is not part of the cerebrum. It is a cerebellum is a separate lobe itself, which is mainly does the function of movements, coordination. All those things are managed by cerebellum. If I'm walking on a straight line, that is because of the cerebellum. If I am able to reach out my glasses and touch it, the coordination, the spatial and the coordination is managed by cerebellum. Cerebellum probably interacts with other lobes and then manages that function. So that is the cerebellum function. So these are all some of the important aspects of the brain. Then there is one more lobe or one more system, what we call it as a limbic system. It is a very important system as far as the mind is concerned. Limbic system or limbic lobe, which sits inside or below the cerebrum. So if the cerebrum is like that, limbic system is here. And from there the brain stem starts, and then which goes on to spinal cord. So limbic system has its own parts. Amygdala is mainly concerned with the fear and certain behavior, aggressive behavior. All those things are mediated through amygdala. Hippocampus is mainly for memory, and we have a thalamus for sensory functions, cingulate gyrus, basal ganglion. All those things are different parts of the limbic system. Altogether, all these three, the 5 or 6 parts together is called as a limbic system. This is important for some of the functions of the mind, sensation or the emotions, the behavior, the memory. All those things are mediated or managed by limbic system. That's why limbic system becomes very important to understand the mind. Some of the research which goes on to understand the mind focuses on limbic system, how it developed from the animal kingdom to the human being, how gradually it developed over a period of time, how it is refined in the human being because we have a higher mental function and the mental faculty is much higher than the animal kingdom. That is because of the well-developed cerebrum, well-developed limbic system and the interaction between these two. And they constitute some of the parts of the brain. What I have discussed about so far is the structural aspect of the brain, the important lobes and other things. But to understand the brain more, how it functions, we need to go to the fundamental unit of the brain. Fundamental unit of the nervous system, which is there all over the body. They are called neuron. There are many number of neurons, and some of the studies say the whole nervous system has about 86 billion neurons. Some of the studies say that there might be 100 billion neurons. That means these neurons connect with other neurons. The connections can go in trillions, because one neuron can connect with number of other neurons. That connections, that's the white matter, that connections can go in trillions. So that's a kind of a system we have. That's a kind of organ we have. So the cells, the neuron has different parts by itself. There is a cell body, and from that it branches out. There are some branches. These are called dendrites. And then from cell body there is a tubular structure which goes out. That is called axon. End of the axon, again there are branches. I'm not going to confuse with number of terminologies. I'm trying to make it very simple. There is a body, what we call cell body, from which there is a dendrites, branches, nerve branches like, and there is a axon, tubular structure which call it as axon. At the end of the axon, again there are branches. So this is one neuron, this is one neuron. Let's say this is the cell body, this is the dendrites, and this is another cell body, and this is dendrites. So the nerves need to talk to each other, pass on the command and impulses. So they talk like this. So the dendrites or axons end, the branches from the axons communicate with each other. This is the cell body, This is a cell body, dendrites. The information has reached this place, and from here the axon and the branches from the axon communicate with each other. So the information from this neuron is passed on to this neuron. So that's how the information passes from the brain to the tip of our toes or tip of our fingers or any parts of the brain, many parts of the body, the organ, heart, lung, any part of the body. Brain communicates and commands and perceives information and analyzes and then acts on it. The neurons are called, there are different types of neurons. There are three types. One is called motor neuron. They are mainly concerned with the motor activity of the brain or human body. So if I am lifting this hand, that is a motor activity. If I am walking down, that is a motor activity. So this motor activity is mediated through motor neurons. And there is another type of neuron called sensory neurons. Sensory neurons mainly concerned with receiving the sensation. We have 5 sensory modalities. All these modalities perceive information. That's where we form the perception. Go back to my 3rd episode or 4th episode, I would have talked about perception. Link that perception with this, what I'm explaining. So sensory information goes in, and then it reaches the brain, and brain analyzes and then acts accordingly. And there are interneurons which connects between the neurons or between different aspects of the brain. From frontal lobe to parietal lobe to occipital lobe, they are connected by neurons. These are all interneurons. So I'll give you an example and tell you how the motor and sensory neuron work. Suppose I'm in the kitchen cooking. I touched a very hot surface, a vessel, something hot surface. It's very hot, so it's very painful also. It can burn my fingers. So that is the sensory information that is picked up by my skin, which is innervated by peripheral nerves. The neurons from that nerve picks up the information and quickly passes to my brain through the relay system. I said one command goes on to the next nerve, and spinal cord, from spinal cord to the brain. It probably goes to the parietal lobe. That is where the sensory informations are processed. Parietal lobe recognizes that it is a very hot surface, and this human being cannot touch that. This human being is going to harm himself by touching that hot surface. That information is already there in the brain, which I have learned from my childhood, adulthood. So that information is quickly kind of analyzed, and then that is passed on to the frontal lobe. Remember, frontal lobe is for motor activity. Frontal lobe activates and the brain decides, okay, this man needs to withdraw his hand immediately, otherwise he's going to burn his hands. So the frontal lobe sends a command which comes through the motor neuron. So sensory neuron takes the hot surface information, and motor neuron sends information, act immediately, remove your hand or move away. That information goes through different parts of the brain to the spinal cord, to the nerve here, and to the nerve which is supplying the muscles here. That command activates the muscle, and immediately I remove my hand from the hot surface. I explained to you over minutes, but it happens in fraction of a second. The moment you touch, you realize you have withdrawn the hand. That quick is the information from that hot surface going to the brain, and brain activating a system which safeguards me, which saved me from burning my hand. That is the power of the brain. That's how the brain works. So, to put it simply, the brain receives the information, analyzes, and sends out command depending on the information. To put it very simply, it is not that simple. Okay, so I talked about brain, I talked about neuron. Hope you have understood what I have said so far. And you might ask me, okay, you said information passes through different neuron, different nerve, reaches the muscle here. How does it go? So let's see how it works. These impulses waves through or comes through the axon from other neuron, and then reaches the cell body and reaches the dendrite, ready to go to the next neuron. Next neuron, there is the cell body, axon, tubular axon, and then there are branches. They meet and this is where the information takes place from one neuron to other neuron. But there is a small microscopic nanular small gap between the two neurons. This neuron's dendrite and this axon's branches. So this gap, the whole structure is called synapse. So it is like this. This is the gap. So this is one neuron, this is one neuron. So they need to communicate. The command coming from here to lift my hand comes and stops here and then need to pass through this gap and go over here. This exchange of information happens through a neurochemical changes. So that's how the exchanges happen. Neurochemical changes happen. The neurochemicals are called neurotransmitters, and they are the one who manage the exchange of information. So what happens is the impulses come, and then there's a small neurochemicals which passes through that gap and then lodges itself onto the next neuron. So these are carriers of that command, or that the electroneurochemical activity is passed on through these small carriers. These carriers called neurotransmitters. There are neurochemicals, neurotransmitters. There are a number of neurotransmitters available, and commonly we discuss about serotonin, which is implicated in the depression, dopamine implicated in the psychosis. Then we have a GABA. We have acetylcholine implicated in dementia, norepinephrine, epinephrine. These are all some of the neurotransmitters, and they are the kind of a very fundamental blocks in the nervous system which transmits information from one neuron to other neuron. That is essential because ultimately information needs to reach the muscle. So that is done at the molecular level by neurochemistry. So we have electrical impulses, we have neurochemical which moves through different neurons through the synaptic space and then transmits information. So we have seen the bigger picture of the brain. We have also looked into the smaller, minute, molecular level activities of the brain. That sums up the brain. So as I said, brain has different lobes, different functions. If you look at these functions, some of the functions are related to the mind, some of the functions are related to the motor activity or other activities like functioning of a heart, functioning of a lung. All those things are mediated by brain. So we have a nervous system which looks after the motor, voluntary movement, and there is another nervous system which looks after the functions like heartbeats, the sweating, or the breathing, and all those things, the gut movement. All those things are all called autonomic nervous system, which we do not have control over it. So that is one part of the brain activity. Other part is emotions, perception. I said we perceive the world through sensations and store them in the brain, called memory. That is also a function of the brain. So all these functions, the perception, emotions, which is mediated by limbic system, are also happening in the brain. So that's why you cannot separate mind and the brain. They are part and parcel. Mind is integral part of the brain. Certain functions of the brain is called as mind. Similarly, we can't dissociate mind and the body. Body and mind work together. They are dependent on each other. They influence each other. I'll give you an example. Suppose I see a very poisonous snake here, cobra here in the room. My reaction will be fear, intense fear. That is mediated by limbic system, particularly amygdala, because my amygdala would have, hippocampus and my amygdala would have stored information that cobra is dangerous. If the cobra bites you, you will die. So immediately the visual perception of the cobra through the occipital lobe interpreted, and then through the memory system and the other lobes of the brain, we perceive that I am seeing a cobra. And the moment I realize that I see a cobra, then the brain activates further and says it is dangerous. It induces a fear, basic emotion which is essential to safeguard human. That is one of the safety mechanism we have. That fear makes me run away. That is a behavior, or makes me aggressive and go and kill this cobra. So you understand how the body and the mind works, and beyond that, the fear activates my heart. My heart beats faster. So my muscles become tense. Why? Because my heart needs to beat faster to pump blood so that I'm ready for action. I'm ready to go and hit and kill that cobra, or I'm ready to run away. That's why muscles are gearing up, getting tense. So that is part of the fear response of the body, but also helps body. When it goes beyond the normal level, then it becomes abnormal. That's where we come in. Psychiatrists and psychologists step in to make it normal again. So what I've said today is to understand mind and brain and the interface, how it works, how brain, mind and the body works together. So mind is essential for the body is essential for the mind. So in this episode, we discussed about brain, how it relates to the mind. So next episode, I will summarize the whole, whatever we have done in the past 12 or 13 episodes. And then after that, we will take up as an example one aspect, what we call one aspect of the therapy. It's called mindfulness therapy. Or mindfulness can be practiced not necessarily for a disorder, for self-development also. We will relate this, whatever we talked so far, to mindfulness and see how we can understand mindfulness. So thank you for being with us. See you again. Bye.